What if the most powerful man in the world believed he was a god? Not symbolically, not politically, but literally. A ruler who didn't just demand loyalty, he demanded worship. And behind the closed doors of the imperial palace, strange rituals began to take place. Rituals that terrified even the elite of ancient Rome. This is the story of Caligula, and the secrets Rome tried to forget. Before the madness, there was admiration. Caligula, born Gaius Julius Caesar, was once seen as a hopeful leader. The son of the respected General Germanicus, he grew up surrounded by power, loyalty, and expectation. When he became emperor in 37 AD, Rome celebrated. The people believed he would restore stability after the rule of Tiberius. And at first, he did. Public games, reforms, generosity. He was loved. But that wouldn't last. Something happened. Ancient historians speak of a severe illness early in his reign. After recovering, Caligula was no longer the same. His behavior shifted. Paranoia replaced trust. Cruelty replaced restraint. He began to test boundaries, humiliate senators, demand absolute obedience. But it didn't stop there, because power alone wasn't enough. He wanted something more. Divinity. Inside the imperial palace, things became stranger. Caligula began presenting himself not just as emperor, but as a living god. Temples were constructed in his honor. Statues of traditional Roman gods were altered, given his face. He reportedly dressed as deities, appearing as Jupiter, Apollo, even Venus. But the most unsettling stories come from private ceremonies, restricted gatherings, where selected members of the elite were forced to attend. Participation wasn't optional. It was expected, and refusal was dangerous. These rituals blurred the line between religion and control. They weren't just about belief. They were about submission, total submission. As Caligula pushed further, fear spread through Rome. The Senate grew uneasy. The elite became silent, because speaking out could mean death. Stories describe unpredictable punishments, public humiliation, executions without warning. Even loyalty wasn't enough anymore, because the rules kept changing, and no one knew where the line was. In a city built on power and politics, Caligula had become something else. Unpredictable, untouchable, or so it seemed. But even in Rome, there were limits, and eventually, those limits were crossed. In 41 AD, members of the Praetorian Guard turned against him. Men who were meant to protect him. They assassinated Caligula inside his own palace. Suddenly, it was over. But what came next is just as important. Rome didn't celebrate him, tried to erase him. His statues were destroyed. His name was condemned. His legacy buried under silence. The story of Caligula is not just about madness. It's about power without limits, about what happens when no one can say no, and about how history remembers or chooses to forget, because sometimes the most dangerous stories are the ones that almost disappeared. For more dark hidden history that was almost erased, subscribe.